Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present two people whom I admire and respect deeply. Both have built their hugely successful careers by shining lights on others and by elevating artists and providing opportunities for those artists to build their own successful careers. Pay it forward, shall I say. I promise you will leave today's session smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and please make some new ones. And also, please ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those along the way as possible. And also, this is very important. Please set your chat to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors for without their support, we could not do this for free. Special thanks to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, and Better Than Booze, and MedJet. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome my pal, Craig Havighurst. Craig is editorial director for WMOT Roots Radio 89.5 FM, where he covers music news and hosts the weekly interview show, The String, covering culture, media, and American music. A Nashville-based author, journalist, broadcaster, and media producer, Craig has been studying musical culture and the music business since the late 1990s. With academic background in literature, journalism, and public policy, Craig has written for NPR, WPLN, The Wall Street Journal, Acoustic Guitar, No Depression, and many other magazines. He was staff writer at the Daily Tennessean from 2000 to 2004. He was also senior producer and co-host of Music City Roots, which is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show that ran from 2009 to 2018. Craig's 2007 book entitled Air Castle of the South, WSM and the Making of Music City tells the story of how Nashville was transformed by one of the nation's greatest radio stations. His online journal called String Theories is an ongoing effort to reinvent musical appreciation for the 21st century by celebrating sound, high-fidelity audio, and musical concepts. Craig, welcome back to the platform, brother. It's so nice to have you.
Pleasure, Tom. Good to see you, buddy.
And joining Craig as today's featured guest is Todd Mayo. Todd is founder of The Caverns, a world-renowned music destination featuring a breathtaking 1,200 capacity concert cave. Yes, concert cave, you got that right. A 6,000 capacity outdoor amphitheater, and a second cave offering both guided walking tours and adventure caving expeditions, along with campgrounds and a yurt village. The Caverns hosts around 90 underground shows and multiple music festivals each year. He's the creator and co-producer of the Caverns Sessions on PBS, the Emmy-winning series and second longest running music show on American television. He also produces Ear to the Common Ground and previously co-founded Music City Roots along with other musical specials filmed worldwide. His Amazon best-selling book called Caveman Chronicles, a mythical musical memoir, was released in fall of 24. It is my pleasure to welcome these two rock stars to our platform today. Take it away, boys.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be with everybody, and certainly great to be with Todd Mayo. I like to tell people that Todd definitely changed my life, gave me an opportunity to be part of the Music City Roots family from the get-go, and had a lot of foresight about the role that storytelling, interviewing, and journalism could play in that show's, success and its aura and its meaning, and I think its longevity. And it was a huge adventure. We're going to talk about that in a little while. Todd, welcome. It's good to see you, man.
Hey, Craig. Good to see you too, buddy. Thanks for having us, Tom.
So Tom gave the. I wanted to start with your description of the caverns, what you are operating now. Tom kind of alluded to some of the bullet points, but what's your pitch about the caverns and what goes on there, Tom? Todd.
Um, well, the Caverns is located in Grundy County, Tennessee. It's a destination music venue. So it literally is inside of a cave. And so I started doing shows in caves in 2008. And in 2018, we moved to Grundy County. We literally switched caves. That's a whole nother story. We might get into that a little
Oh, we
bit.
got to get into that real quick. Yeah.
But when people come to the caverns, it's a destination music experience. And so it started out as a cave. And then during the COVIDs, we opened up another cave that people can go tour called Big Room Cave. And then we also opened up the amphitheater and opened up campgrounds and then debuted Yurt Village. So it's sort of like a great American music park. It's combining outdoors and Mother Nature with music, and I think some really special and profound ways.
And while the original business model in the old cave was called Bluegrass Underground, throughout your booking of the cave venues and the amphitheater now has been extremely eclectic. You know, people may associate you with roots music and Music City Roots and the Bluegrass Underground, but talk about the breadth of shows and some of the stuff that surprised you, that A, sells out, and B, draws people from all over the country and the world.
Well, and that's, I guess, hitting on something there, Craig, and this is a statistic that kind of blows me away. And we were 2 or 3 years into the caverns before we ever like sat around and looked and said, well, we know that the parking lot is filled with license plates from all over the country, but where are these people coming from? And so like we went to our ticket data and I was just astounded by this statistic. 73% of all of our patrons come from outside the state of Tennessee.
Wow.
And so it's just, flashing back, to 2008 when I started. It was the second or third show at the original cave, and a couple comes up, I remember, and they were like, well, what time zone are we in? And I said, oh, you're in the central time zone. And I said, where are you from? And they said, oh, we're from California. I said, where'd you hear about us? They said, oh, our friends in Michigan told us. And we had only been doing it a couple months. And I was like, wow, like this is a destination. And so, yes, it was booked and it was conceived and called Bluegrass Underground with bluegrass music, which we both share an affinity for, to me, always was kind of a metaphor for, a lot of things with me are literal and metaphoric. So literally it was Bluegrass Underground, but it was also bluegrass is kind of a metaphor for like music that's played, that's authentically. I mean, and I go back to something that Eddie Stubbs told me back when we were doing Music City Roots was the guy that had preceded him at the Opry. I think was it Hank Snow? You'd know more than me, Craig. Was it Hank somebody that was preceded Eddie said, well, everybody that plays here is an act, but not everybody's an artist. And
Mm.
Eddie, you just introduced that act as an artist. You were wrong. And Eddie said, well, forgive me, I'm ignorant. What's the difference? And he said, well, if anybody that would do it for free, that's an artist. So by that definition, anybody that's playing bluegrass music professionally is an artist, right? And so, and that might go for Americana or blues or jazz or, so I was just always interested in, principally in the beginning with, people use the word authentic, but just the word real suffices, right? People that are artists that are doing it for the love of it and trying to shine a light on them in the darkness. And that's sort of what has kind of been the inspiration for me behind all of this. Now, as we've evolved to kind of answer the second part of your question at the caverns, we do all kinds of music. And because, going into a cave is such a visceral, primal, I would even say like deeply embedded in our like DNA and limbic system kind of a situation.
Hmm.
The first art emerged out of caves, right? Literally, human beings were in caves. And as far as we can tell, they sat around and said, we got to draw something here. Maybe it was guilt over having to kill the bison. Maybe it was to do a rite of passage for a boy becoming a man. I don't know. People speculate on it, but
They
you can.
also sang in caves. The first music was made in caves. People sang there because it was resonant.
That's where I was going with it
Yeah.
exactly. So all art, including music, originated in caves. And so when you come in back into a cave and see your favorite artist, well, of course, it doesn't matter what genre it is, right? And that's how the caverns has evolved. So, we do gospel shows, we do Christian music shows, we do death metal, we do, in terms of being surprised, this is not something I'm surprised at. Far from it, but it's something that at the old cave we never could have done, but I always wanted to lean into. Now I'm 52 years old, so I'm so old I would call it a rave, a cave rave, but EDM music and electronic music, I knew that that would be something that we could really lean into. And it's
Hmm.
become something we've become, quite famous as an EDM experience as well. And I got to tell you this one funny story. We had this guy, John Summit, last year plays, Madison Square Garden. He's the hottest thing in the EDM world. Not that I'd know it, but he's a big deal or whatever. So I was out there talking to these people, and they were asking me something, and there was these three women, looked like models, and they had these European accents. And I said, "Well, where are y'all from?" And they said, "Oh, we're from Ibiza. We come to Grundy County." I've done a horrible accent of Ibiza. But anyway, there's, the cool Ibiza models are coming to the middle of nowhere, Grundy County, Tennessee, to see John Summit in a cave. So it never fails to make me happy and delighted to see people coming from all over.
So word of mouth is certainly a factor of this. You also have a TV series, but what have you done over the years to try to project the story and actually, from a marketing point of view, get the word out about what this is, what it looks like and feels like to a general broad audience? How have you invested in marketing?
Well, you hit the first one was the TV show. So the very first show we ever did was August 16th at the original cave, Cumberland Caverns in McMinnville. And a guy came to interview me for NPR about this crazy dude doing shows in caves or whatever. And we get to the end of the deal, and he says, "What's your real vision for this?" And I said, "Man, I grew up on PBS, Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street and Austin City Limits. So little Todd, who was too young to go see live music, when I was 10 or 11, 12 years old, I'd watch it on PBS and watch Austin City Limits." And so when I said that to him, he said, "Man, I'm actually a producer for PBS." And I said, "What was your name again?" And he said, "Todd." And so I said,
Yeah.
"I remember that, dude." So we formed a production company called Todd Square, yada, yada, yada. It airs, all across the country. We're doing season 14 in 2025, and our production company has done shows in Cuba and the Ryman and all over the world, different projects. And so I laugh about it now, but it's like, well, you never know what can happen when you walk into a cave, man. My life
Yeah.
certainly changed in terms of marketing for like directly doing it. What we really do is just market the shows and the artist. So, we do 90 shows this year. So that's 90 marketing campaigns telling 90 groups of fan bases, some of whom have never heard of the caverns, right? So it
Right.
just explodes that way, right? And then it's totally experiential. Like people go, they have a good time, they tell somebody, they share it. So, digital media, since we started all this, digital's gotten huge. So we focus a lot on digital.
Cool. A good question that I don't want to let slide by. Glenn Friedman asking you, where do patrons stay after the shows? What are the accommodations in the area up there near Sewanee and Mount
Sure.
Eagle and so forth?
Sure, sure. One of the challenges of having this amazing, destination music venue is we can't, if I could, I Dream of Jeannie, blink and blink a lodge into existence, it would be full, and we'd love to have people stay on premise. We do have campgrounds, and we do have like glamping tents, and we do have 20 yurts, but for the most part, and this is actually something really, really cool. People, Manchester's 15 minutes away where they do Bonnaroo. So there's a Holiday
Right.
Inn there. Monteagle Mountain, where I live, there's hotels on that. So, and then there's just a whole huge amount of Airbnbs that have sprung out of the caverns because, this year we'll have over 100,000 people coming to the caverns. And again, 73% of them are from out of state. So there's become a real ecosystem of Airbnbs. But and this is something segue, and it's a great question, Glenn. We don't have infrastructure at the caverns historically, water and sewage. we're in a very rural place. And, to the credit of the state of Tennessee and Tennessee tourism and the governor, they realize that this is such a huge tourism play in what has been an economically distressed county. And so they
Right.
have did a grant where it's going to be about another year and a half before it's in the ground, but to bring water and sewage, not only to the caverns, but to Pelham. And that's going to really be a game changer for us in terms of offering accommodation for people and patrons to come and stay on site.
I see. And to be clear, folks, there is a very nice bathroom, men's and women's, in the caves venue. So it's not
Oh,
like
yeah.
you're finding your place out in the woods. Anyway, um, infrastructure is just a fascinating part of this story. And I want you to share with folks some of what it took when you say you moved caves. And let's just set it up a little bit with the setting of the Cumberland Caverns, where you had your initial epiphany, got yourself worked up to actually be a concert promoter for the first time in your life. We're going to walk back through your career a little bit later, but the conspicuous thing about Cumberland Caverns was that it was public land, so you were sort of leasing the space, and it's a state park, right?
No, it's
It's
privately owned.
it's privately owned. Okay,
Yeah.
um, but it was a cave where to get to the concert hall in what was called what was the big
The
room called?
volcano
The
room.
volcano room.
Yes.
You had to hike down a trail and then go and find this little. There was a door in the side of the mountain, and you went in there, and it was a very nicely lit, well appointed cave. It was fascinating. You got stalagmites and stalactites on the way in, and water, and then suddenly you come up to this monstrous room with, of all things, a crystal chandelier and just an extraordinary space. And so that had the grandeur, but by moving, you have, I think, a much grander experience arriving and getting to the mouth of the cave. The exterior looks much more exciting and more cave-like, and you're much more accessible. So folks who were just have a little more mobility issues, it was really hard for them to get to the old venue. So that's one of the reasons you moved. But continue this compare and contrast, and how the heck did you find a cave and make it work?
Yeah. So I'll answer the last question first. And my book is really kind of about this.
Yeah.
I say in the book, what's the difference in coincidence, providence, happenstance, synchronicity? They're all sort of different words for the same thing. And I have thankfully, gracefully, luckily, happily been the beneficiary of a lot of kismic, things happening at the right time. And we only looked for one cave when we knew that we needed to move caves. And going back to the original cave, it was owned by a private individual, and it wasn't set up to be a music venue. So it was a huge undertaking to do shows there and to do the television show there. We had to bring in all of the three-phase power. We had to run cables for like 3 days. And then every time we did a show, it was a massive undertaking. And it only held 500 people. And to top it off, they were sort of I don't know if I'd say militant teetotalers, but teetotalers. They wouldn't allow beer, and I didn't have a piece of the concession. So I kind of came into this, and I reflect about this, about life itself. And sometimes, what is life? I'm going to go a little philosophical here for everybody, but if you think about it, like what is life except, seeing a vision of the ideal and then having reality intercede, right? We all start off with the ideal. And then we work our way towards reality. And that's kind of what life is. You're a kid, you want to be center fielder for the New York Yankees. You end up working at, CarMax processing a loan or whatever. You know what I mean? It just is what it is. We all have on so many levels through our relationships, our jobs, the purpose that we have in life. We have an idealized version of it. And then we have the reality. So what our reality was this great cave that had the chandelier and had this whole thing, but it wasn't ideal. And so I said to my right-hand man, Joe Lergio, who's the GM of the caverns, there's 11,000 caves in the state. We got to go find one that's more suited for what we're doing and the growth that I really see. And so he had a caving friend named Buck. And Buck said, well, there's this cave that might work. It's out there in Grundy County, Tennessee. It's not on a map. And he kind of told him around about where it was. So me and Joe, the only cave we ever went to, were traipsing around through these woods, and we couldn't find the cave. And I gave up. And it's a good lesson in life. Always bring a buddy. And I've had a lot of partnerships in my career, and it's always good to have a partner. And so I said, I can't shit. I don't know where it is, Joe. And I turned around to walk away, and he goes, there it is. And sure enough, turned around, and there through these woods was this beautiful, and it looks the exact same today, this grand opening of what historically was known as Big Mouth Cave. And so that would have been in the summer, August of 2016. And then we spent, a few months doing diligence on the cave to make sure that it, in fact, could become the cave of my dreams, right? Or an idealized version of what we were doing, which would mean permanent power, permanent sound, permanent lights, easier to get into. Of course, selling concessions. TV show would look just as good. The experience be even better. And so it was a little bit of a needle in the cave stack because, but of all, we didn't have to, that wasn't the 351st cave we went to, right? That was the first. And
Didn't
honestly,
realize that.
for people that know about caves and serious spelunkers, there's not a cave anywhere that was probably as suited for what we do and are doing than that. So again, that goes back to that, providential, whatever you want to say.
And you had to dig out a whole bunch of silt that is, if you were standing in the room, a concert goer at watching a show today would have had silt over their head, right?
Oh, well, that you could touch the ceiling from the stage. So one of my lines is, people say, well, how in the hell do you turn a wild cave into a magic music, venue? And I say, well, it's about a three beer story, which right now we're probably about a half a beer in. But I say the gist of it is, it took a lot of gist, and that's geologist, hydrologist, archaeologist, and biologist. And we did our diligence. And so we brought in, the first thing was the geologist. And I was like, well, man, where's the floor? Because if we're hitting solid rock 2 feet under or 10 feet under, this ain't going to work. You could dump 20 million, $50 million just to try to bust that rock. So they drilled down and they were like, oh no, it goes down 15 feet here, 20 feet here. And I was like, okay, now I can visualize it. It's got the sense of scale. What is all this? They're like, oh, it's flotsam and jetsam. It's just thousands of years of rock and debris and dirt washed in. And so it's okay, we can work with that. And then we had to bring in a hydrologist because the cave is a living, what's called a borehole cave. And when we have big rain events, it floods. It floods from the outside in and it floods from the under the ground up. The water
Wow.
table goes. And so we basically did it like you would your basement. We put in a concrete floor. It sloped just a little bit to the sump, which is over by the front of house engineering. And so when the ground table comes up, the water naturally pipes it back over to what's the other part of the cave, which brings in the biologist. Because Craig, and I don't know if you know this, but maybe somebody out there knows this. I didn't know this. The Tennessee state amphibian is the big mouth salamander that resides in our cave. And so we had to bring out Dr. Niedermeyer, and we said, Dr. Niedermeyer, please tell us that we're not harming these salamanders. And he said, oh no, far from it. This the water that you're doing and the volume that you're pushing through with these, it's wonderful. It's more organic matter for them. And we're just like, all right, yay for us. So we're doing. Dr. Niedermeyer signed up, and then archaeology. Obviously we are in Cherokee Indian country,
Oh
and
yeah.
Indians before that. And we, man, you can't walk anywhere in the Pelham Valley and not kick dirt up and get an Indian arrowhead or pottery. And it was for thousands of years home to them. So we definitely didn't want to desecrate a Indian burial ground. I don't know, you're around my age. Do you remember the Brady Bunch when they found they were in Hawaii and they found I don't know if you that they were cursed, they found you don't. I learned very early you don't mess with that. I'm making a joke, but we did want to honor that and didn't want to do that. And the archaeologists said, no, man, they didn't bury their dead in wet caves that would flood 5 times a year. So that was good. And kind of back on that the Cherokee deal on a serious note. And it goes back to a segue from the logistics into sort of the real purpose behind all this for me personally. Um, from a spiritual standpoint, is there was a great Indian named Sequoia, and Sequoia came up with the Sequoian script because he wanted his people to read, and so we partnered with the Sequoia Birthplace Nation and the Cherokee Nation, the Sequoia Birthplace Museum, I should say.
Hmm.
And there was a phrase that I wanted burned into these magic doors before you come into the caverns. And most people don't see them because when the show, the doors are open, but they're always there. And what it says in Sequoian script is, "Welcome to the caverns, where the Great Spirit brings all people together through music." And I just
Wow.
believe that that's what music does. You used to hear me say that back at Music City Roots is a thing. It's like, it ties into back when I was in college. And I used to be, before I sort of spent my life working on what brings people together, I used to be kind of an impish kind of instigator. And I used to like to really trip out on like what divides them. So college age Todd would be at a party having beers. And I'd look at three people and say, "Who'd you vote for in the last election? Where do you go to church? And what do you think about OJ? Now talk amongst yourselves." So I used to love that. And politics and race and religion, they divide people. It's sad that they do. But music brings people together. Sports and music. And so in sports, it's a zero-sum game. Half the people got to go home pissed. In music, everybody wins. And so that's
Hmm.
embedded in everything that I do. I'm not a musician. I experience music viscerally. It gives me great joy, just like it does for so many people. And so to just have these places, whether it was a barn in Music City Roots in Nashville, or a cave in Grundy County, or in Cuba at this place, or Ireland where we've been, or Australia, I'm always looking at unique places to showcase and shine a light on music. But at the end of the day, it's about, the music industry, and there's nothing wrong with it, but they call them black boxes. One venue is the same as another, and so to have something that's special or different or unique that makes people really want to go there as a destination, man, that's just freaking awesome.
Yeah, it has been awesome. Love going there. Well, you talked about falling in love with music. You write about that a bit in the book. Here it is, folks, Caveman Chronicles. Thanks for the copy, Todd.
Yeah.
Fascinated to get your backstory. Enjoyed reading it. And because your life was so radically different before you hit the world of concert promotion. And you point out in the book that you have lived in all three zones of Tennessee. You grew up in in West Tennessee in Memphis, went to college in Knoxville in East Tennessee, and spent a lot of your life in Nashville. What would you like folks to know about your trajectory, and include in that where you fell in love with music and why?
Um, yeah. Well, okay. Back in Memphis, music is just a part of my life, like it is everybody that's sitting here watching this. I have 100% certainty of that. We all love music, and it's always been, when I look at myself, I think back that there was like always a soundtrack to my life. And it was an interesting thing I did one time because I was born in 1972. So I went back and looked at like, the top 100 songs from like each year from like when I was born, and then I could remember.
Hmm.
And I know the words to so many of those songs, just a couple that come to mind: Brownstone Cowboy, or Funky Town, or, Sean Cassidy, or whatever it was, Let 'Em In, but Paul, but I don't ever listen to those songs. I haven't listened to those songs in 40 years, 50
Yeah.
years, or whatever it is, 45 years. And so it's just like, wow. You know what I mean? Like my memories are being in our station wagon, going to church, going to school, going to the grocery store, sitting in the back of the station wagon. There's music playing. And so it's always been a part of my life. When I actually became a serious music fan, well, I was 11, and music was a portal for me through like tough times. So I write in the book that when I was 10, my dad went to jail. When I was 11, my parents got divorced. My kind of whole world got thrown into some, disarray or whatever, and chaos. And it was like music that really, and I think it probably just coincided with a lot of people. When you're 11 years old or 10, you're a little preteen. Most people get into music around that time, their own music. But I can remember in 1983, I'd have been 11. I asked Santa Claus, who I don't think I still believed in, but whatever. I was young enough that I remember I got the Millennium Falcon, but I also got U2 Live Under a Blood Red Sky. And that was my first tape that I ever got that was mine, that I
Yeah.
owned. And so I was a huge U2 fan, and loved them. And, that Red Rocks iconic performance that they did, it's funny to think about, that 10-year-old, 11-year-old me that, if he could see right now and be like, he loved, Red Rocks and mythologize that. And now you own a venue that people say is like Red Rocks with a roof. And he's sitting around watching Austin City Limits and you got a show on PBS. So in
Yeah.
many ways, I guess my dreams have, my 11-year-old self's dreams have all come true. He just didn't even know enough to dream it.
Yeah, right on. Um, you went into radio,
I
and that
did.
was kind of the bulk of your career. And you bop around, and you've had adventures and misadventures, and you try stuff. And well, let me pull up one thing to set this chapter of your life up. You say in
Mhm.
the book that you have a gambler's nature, that you are a risk taker. I also remember you talking about when you and John Walker were cooking up ideas. You talked about throwing your hat over the fence and then figuring out how to go get it.
Yeah.
So what was Todd like in your radio sales years, and why were you attracted into that world?
Well, my mother was into advertising and radio sales, so I grew up on it. And
Okay.
so I got to a certain point, I went to college, but I went 4 years and I said, I'm going to go take a break. And so I moved down to the Virgin Islands. And so I never graduated from college. And I went to high school. I went to three different high schools. But when it got time to graduate, they said, Todd, and I'm not saying I was at every class, and I'm not saying that I was awake at every class. And I'm not saying I was sober in every class, but I did pass all my classes. I went to like three or four different high schools, but in the last one I
Uh,
was in, they said, Todd, your religion credits aren't going to transfer because you're at a public school, so you're not going to get to graduate. And
Whoa.
you telling me Jesus Christ is keeping me from graduating high school? And she goes, I'm not saying that, but you just did. So I dropped out of high school that very moment. There was 2 weeks to go left and the thing. So I never graduated from high school. I never graduated from college. And so looking around and being kind of a gift of gab person, you look around at what other people do. What did my mom? Oh, she does that. She's, got that. So, I started at WLAC in 1998 with a Yellow Pages and a phone, and you start cold calling people and asking them if they want to buy advertising, and you get into that world. And so it was learning that world and that business. And so I knew radio. I knew radio. I knew all about radio. I knew how it worked. And so, and then I had my own advertising agency. So when I walked into that cave, I had left the corporate world and I had my own ad agency. And so, it was interesting because if I'd have walked in that cave 10 years before, I might have had the idea, but I wouldn't have known how to do it. And
Right.
so it was a perfect opportunity of really melding what I was good at, what I knew, and what I enjoyed. And yes, I had no experience in the music business, but I was able to visualize it. And I said, okay, if I can get this on WSM, how am I going to get it on WSM? I want to do it on WSM. Oh, I know. I'll get a sponsor to do it. So I go to my big advertising client, a Sin Federal Credit Union. They're sponsoring. Now I got WSM's attention because it's putting gas in their tank. Then I
Mhm.
reach out to artists. Nobody knew me from Adam. But I say, hey, you want to come play on this promotional thing on WSM right before the Grand Ole Opry? Sure, sounds like a good idea to me. In a cave, cool. First act we ever had was the Steel Drivers with Chris Stapleton. So 211 people paid $15 to see Chris Stapleton in a magic cave in August 16th, 2008. And so I just got into it, because, and then a year later, John and I started Music City Roots. So,
Yeah.
things just hit a certain point where when I walked into that cave, I had this idea and, head in the sky, feet on the ground. I knew what to do. I just hadn't done it. And
Well, you're the passage in the book where you are kind of waiting for opening night to see how it goes, and you've thrown your hat over the fence, metaphorically speaking, is really a great thing because you really share your inner dialogue and the inner turmoil and
oh,
uncertainty, and yeah, it was kind of all or nothing, kind
it was,
of.
and that's happened repetitively and consistently, and as a
Yeah.
theme of my life. And talking about risk taking, you asked about that. My sister-in-law, Catherine, she's very risk averse, and just to kind of mess with her, one time she was just like, "Todd, how do you do all this? You gotta." I said, "Catherine, unless I got about 8 or 10 different things happening all at once, and every one of them is on the edge of a knife and could fail at any moment, I can't sleep." And she just and I don't want things to be like that, to be honest. I don't. But I don't. I want things to not be like that. But the fact of it is, probably by birth, I am risk. I'm risk tolerant. And
Mhm.
it's calculated risk. I'm not willy-nilly doing, crazy things, but it was a big deal to move caves. It was a big deal to during COVID to pivot like we did and do an amphitheater and do, there's a lot of things that I've done where I've always just felt like I'm constantly building the train track in front of the train.
Yeah.
And as long as the train doesn't get there before the track's laid out, I'm gonna be okay. Sometimes a train is like right there. Sometimes I can see the train down there and I got a nice little, I was like, hey, train. So the whole idea is to get that train as far away as possible and get that track laid, but it's an ever changing. Sometimes you look around and there's that damn train coming again. You got to figure something else out, but
Uh-huh.
I'd say to answer your question, I'm born that way. It's
I've
nothing I've
watched it happen. We had Music City Roots jumped radio stations 4 times, venues twice, then 2 attempts at a new venue. It was always doing what you
Huh.
could. Can you share a little more in the story? I was captivated by the bit about you getting into a scheme that had to do with sports betting and radio plays, and what was that? What was that deal? That was just funny.
God. Well, I do want to say this back to your point about
Yeah. Okay.
changing, using things. One of the themes of my life, professionally and personally, and it's the theme of the book is home. And I was at one point kicked out of my mom's house, and then I was literally evicted from my dad's with all my shit thrown out on the street. And like Music City Route, like the original Cave. I'm being kind of magnanimous about why we left, but we were sort of evicted from there. And that happened at Music City Roots at the Loveless. It happened in Franklin. It happened at the radio stations. And like, I guess somebody that you would really look around and say, well, what am I doing wrong? Because all these things aren't working, but you were there. You know what great partners we were. Like, we were great for the Loveless. There was just things that were beyond our control. It had
Yeah.
nothing to do with Tom Morales. We were great for the factory. We were great for WSM. So there's it's interesting because in life, you can really be a good partner. You can have a really good idea, but somebody can pull the carpet out from you anytime they want. And so part of my journey has been a process. It's why finding my own cave, the cave of my dreams that I own, there's enough reasons to go bankrupt in the music business without having somebody that pull the carpet out from under you. So
Mm,
a lot of my life. So in an exterior way, the book is about finding my way home, but then an interior way, in sort of a personal way, there's a whole nother journey that's about coming home. And you'll have to read the book to see that journey. But literally the last word in the book is home, and
yeah.
it's one of the first words in the book. And so, but back to your point about that story is just, yeah, no. I've always been kind of a Walter Mitty kind of a dude, and my head's always I'm always daydreaming about stuff or having a scam or a scheme, and I mean my whole life is like this. And so one thing I did was I like sports, and I had this great idea. My buddy Dugan and I would have these advertising clients that were just scam artists. They were just literally scam artists, and they would get suckers, touts to tell them like the Eagles are playing the Giants and the Giants are -7, and they'd call these people and pay them money to get their opinion. But of course, all they were doing was flipping a coin because it didn't matter, and it was a whole scam. And so I had this other buddy, Carl, that was actually a pretty good sports handicapper. And he could pick like 56% of his bets right because I went into his sportsbook.com and looked over a whole year of bets, and I did the math. And in sports betting, if you are doing just a little bit better than 50%, you can actually make real money. So I
Hmm.
said, we're going to call this Win No BS. And we're going to revolutionize the sports gaming industry. We're going to put all these fucking bad people out of business, and we're going to get rich at the same time, and we're going to do it legitimate. And so we had these great commercials, and we were telling people like win no BS because our whole big hook was we were going to post our pick right when the game started, so we couldn't lie. And it was transparency. This was like the year 2003 or four, whatever it was, 20 years ago. And so the first year or the first week, we went like 14-1. And we were just dancing a jig, and oh my God, this is amazing. And people were signing up left and right, and I was counting the money, and I was like, my God, I can't believe how rich I'm about to be. And we're putting all these guys. And then the very next week, we went 1-14. And then the next week, we went worse. And then it kept getting worse. And so it's an idea of like, it was a great idea. It could have revolutionized that world and that business. It was bringing transparency to something that's shady. It was bringing ethics to something that was not ethical.
Mm, yeah.
But, at the end of the day, that wasn't what I was meant to do. But the funniest thing, I don't know if you can cuss on this, but it is funny. I'm going to cuss. We're on the online. But I write in the book, and I got an email from somebody that said, "Win no BS." He said, what did he say? I could feed a monkey a quarter and let him shit it out and do better with my picks than you do. Fuck off and cancel my membership. And I write about in the book where that was the end of that, and I write about some of my other schemes and scams. And there's the FBI involved in one of them. And I just have this whole kind of thing where, and it goes back to gift the gab or whatever. It
Mhm.
seems like all around me was a bunch of cons. And like I really probably could have been a good con man, And so, I didn't end up being a con man, but for a while there, it just felt like I was just meant to be a con man. And that's I'm glad it didn't work out that way. And I,
Yeah.
I write about that too, and about sort of a spiritual situation and things in my life, and kind of surrendering to the divine will. And
Yeah.
it gets deep. I didn't start out to write a spiritual book or inspirational book, but having done it, it's spiritual, and I've been told by people it is inspirational, and that makes me happy.
Nice. Um, to go back to your describing the partnerships that you tried to build, I loved hearing the phrase that you guys cooked up, the alliance, and this was in the context of Music City Roots, an alliance of fans, bands, and brands.
Right.
And that reminded me very much of the WSM story in the early days of sponsored shows on radio. And we pursued that model, uh, both on stage and in the presentation, but then behind the scenes. And to support it, you had this hopeful three-legged stool in a terrain that others in corporate life have called branded entertainment. But it was more complete than that because it did embrace the fans. It looked at the world from their point of view, and the brands were the sponsors and the bands were the art. So elaborate on that.
It was a patronage model, and it was the bands, fans, and brands. And my background was advertising. What I loved was music, and what I was a fan. So that's really what it kind of came out of. And and the thing was, is if we connected with brands that were as authentic or real in what they do as the artist and the music, then it will work, and people won't feel like they're being marketed to. Again, it was about bringing, advertising is another BS industry, right? Full of hucksters and con men and women, and shady shit. And so it's just like, well, what if we just, brought people out and said, hey, you like this music? Well, so does Vietti Chili. Get you next time you're in the grocery store, get a Vietti Chili or French's Boots or a Send Federal Credit Union or the Nature Conservancy or the Nissan. They did the Nissan Leaf, and they were coming out with all that at the time. And all these different brands that we partnered with. But that was just a lot of it was, well, here's something just that, so we're on a webinar right now, and we're doing this through technology. But in 2010, we were live streaming Music City Roots every
I was
week,
I was
high
going to ask about that.
definition, while Netflix was still mailing people DVDs. Okay, so that's a fact. And so when people go, I encourage you to go onto the YouTube Music City Roots channel. There's 250,000 subscribers. There's 500,000,000 views. We haven't done a show in 8 years, and we were really ahead of the curve, doing something using technology, using traditional things like radio. And the two most important words of Music City Roots were on air, and just that live musical variety show. And people called it the Grand Alt Opry and this and that and the other. But what it was a platform using traditional media, radio, just like WSM had that you wrote the book on, but also, and using public television, because we put it out on PBS as well, but also using the internet and live streaming. And we had people from all over the world joining us at 7 o'clock Central, live here in Keith Bilbrey from Music City. And there you were, and there was Jim Lauderdale, and there the artists were, and everybody came to the end and did a big jam. And it was just so profound and so spiritual. And as close to Wednesday night in the South as church night. And it was
Yeah.
like church. It was like we went to church every Wednesday, and I miss it dearly. I really do. But it was a fun while it lasted, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I remember vividly when it was time on Wednesday to head south on 65, go to the factory, or head out to the Loveless Cafe. It felt like a long way. It was traffic. It was rush hour, and you'd be like, okay, what's going on in the weekend? I've got all these deadlines, and then, man, when that light turned on and the arc of the 2.5 hours and the buzz after it was all over, just the greatest drug I ever took. It was
Me
absolutely
too.
amazing.
Me too.
Your booking was exceptional, and it was very it was also risk tolerant. Fans could come and see one thing or two artists that they were familiar with. It was sort of in a safety zone, and then they'd see Dex Romweber. And I'm still wondering why you booked Dex Romweber so early on, one of the great eccentric Gothic figures, God rest his soul, of Southern roots music, and Jason D. Williams, the mad guy with his piano. And tell us about the beginning of your booking and what was guiding you and what you learned about the process of putting out offers and working with their
Oh,
agents and so forth.
here's crazy, crazy, man, crazy. I had never done this before in my life. Nobody knew who I was, and now I'm just doing this for a living. And when we did Bluegrass Underground, it was booking one band for every month, and I was like, oh my God, I've got to do this every month. And then a year later, we started Music City, and it's like, oh no, we're doing this every week now, and it's not one band, there's four bands. And a lot of times I would do five or six bands because I couldn't say no. And
Yeah.
so the whole idea was the whole idea was like, let's just have, what do I like to listen to? At the time, I would have used an iPod, but my iPod, analogy was diverse. And it was all just coming from what I liked as a fan. It was like, well, look, what if you come to a show and you have, an artist that's more country or Americana, or something that's a singer songwriter, or something that's just rock and roll, and then you just get something different. And then, that Grand Ole Opry was all sort of country music, but this is like, we lived in Music City. It's Nashville's Music City. It's not just commercial country music city, and that's great. But like, let's do a lot. Let's do everything. And it was just a joy to do. But I think I write in the book about it, because I think I wrote about you, and how maybe you would say when your write-ups, like you would ascribe all of these ways that these shows were connected, and you would attribute like some genius to me for doing that, and nothing could be further than the truth. I would just laugh, because I was like, it just is happening, man. I'm throwing more shit, so much shit against the wall, and it sticks where it sticks. And if that seems like that was with intention to you, wonderful. And it was, to some extent, of course it was. But
I was aware of the kismet that was
yeah,
going on, that some of the connections that I was looking for and finding were products of my own invention, products of just that kismet thing, that fate
yeah.
that
Well, they
brings
were, and
artists together
there
that had a
wasn't. Yeah,
story.
sometimes
And it's
there was.
Nashville. Everybody's in a web anyway, by and large.
Yes.
But the show, man, we had Sturgill Simpson on there. We had Brandy Carlisle on there, Billy Strings. Early on, I mean, this is to see some of these artists now and where they play, and to think we had them for 2 and 4 and 500 people at a time is pretty remarkable.
Well, the very first, I think it's better to be lucky than good. But sometimes, again, when I write about this in the book, like, why do these things happen the way they happen? And when you have them happen over and over and over, like the very first show we ever did was Chris Stapleton and the Steel Drivers. The first show we did at the Caverns in March of 2018 was Billy Strings. I was like, well, who am I going to get to open up the new cave with? Nobody had heard of Billy Strings at that point. I had, you had, but I mean, it didn't even sell out. But it was just like, I
That's
knew, looking at him, I was like, I want somebody that's the 2018 version of Chris Stapleton in 2008. And my money at that time was on Billy Strings. But I had no idea if that would, he would become Billy Strings. We can't even get him back now. He's gotten so big. But that's fine. It's just like, that sort of, um, as a fan, if you just book things as a fan, and that's what I do now to this very day. I'm not saying I'm a fan of every artist that comes to the Caverns, because now we're a music venue that has all kinds of different things coming. But I'm not a fan. I don't know. Whatever,
Yeah. To some degree, a talent buyer like yourself has to look at the figures in Polestar magazine and say,
Sure.
who's a guaranteed sellout? Who I need those butts and seats, and we'll book bands that are going to do well in our space, and I'll have other acts that are passion nights for me, and get a band I want to see.
Well, it's a business, and it's a hard business, and I'm one of the only independent venue owners that
Yeah.
also is a independent promoter that promotes all their own shows that I know of, doing what we're doing in the country. And so I'm playing with my own money, and that's not something I grew up with. If you read the book, you'll see that I didn't come from money. I'm not money motivated, but I am, I'm trying to make a difference more than make money. But by the way, you go out of business, you can't make no difference no more. So you
Yeah.
got to be paying attention on every single artist that you book. As a venue, you need to be cognizant of that. Now, with Music City Roots was a different model. I used to say back in those days, we're not a butts and seats, we're about the content. But the problem with that was we were so egalitarian that we gave all the gate to the artist. And we say, because we have this vision of this thing. And then it was like, okay, but then how are we going to pay for everything? And that's
Yeah.
a whole nother story, you know? So sometimes my idealism and my enthusiasm as a business person can cost me. And I'm aware of that, you know, and I try to keep my feet on the ground a little bit more than I used to do, but I can't help it with the head in the sky because it's who I am.
I was going to ask a few questions as we get to the end here about the concert business and what you've observed now in 2024 and looking forward. For one question is, what is the temptation? What does it look like to be in your position when a Live Nation might want a piece of what you're doing? Do you weigh the pros and cons of, and have they ever promoted any shows in your venue? Do you say no, none of that? Because
No.
a couple of great studies have come out in the last couple of months about the Nashville venue ecosystem and the factors of affordability that and venues for some of our favorite venues downtown are being priced out of their spaces. It's a low margin business everywhere. The crowds after the pandemic, they kind of surged into the marketplace in the first year in 2021 and 22, and then there was a reported sort of falling away. I see artists having trouble selling advance tickets, even though they'll do fine in that market, but people don't tend to buy tickets in advance for certain kinds of shows. What are the dynamics you're seeing and the challenges of being an independent venue owner?
Well, very lucky. We're doing nothing but growth year over year, and people are buying in advance because you have when you're coming from all over the country, you have to plan in advance. So, you know, we are. I would not want to be in this business if I was in a black box or just some theater somewhere. I wouldn't do it. You know, it's too much work. It's too hard. So, thankfully, I've got my we've created our own experience, and it's badass, and people want to come to it, and when you go look at the trip reviews of TripAdvisor or Google reviews or whatever,
Mhm.
it's all about, not all about, but it's a lot of it is about, oh my God, the interaction I had with a security person or a house person or a bartender or a parking lot person or just anybody that works in the caverns. We're a family. And, one of the things I'm proudest of is we've built the caverns pre-pandemic. We started in like 2018, but all the way through before the pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic, it's about half city mice and about half country mice. And so we're not even though a lot of us were from Nashville, like it's rural and urban people working together to make shit happen in a way that is profound. And I'm super proud of that. And then so people come all over the world and they see it's like a family. And it is like a family because we can't just say if we were a business and most music venues in urban areas, which is where most of them are, they have a security company they hire, and they have a concessions company they hire, and they have a box office company they hire, and they're not doing all that internally. And there's nothing wrong. It's not that they don't have good employees or people do good, but
Yeah.
it's just different when you've got a security team. Like our security guys have this shirt that says Semper Gumby, means always be flexible. And Mike and Dennis run our security, and everybody. We tell people Yellowstone copied off of us because they wear these cowboy hats and have these. They say, "Oh, they look like a Yellowstone." I was like, "Nah, we were doing that. They're country boys. They have their thing, but they do it. It's such a family atmosphere." And so I love it when somebody will say, "Oh my God, I went from Nebraska or Poughkeepsie or wherever to go to the caverns, and I had this great time and met this great person," and they'll go on and on about that. And I say, "Oh yeah, the visuals were awesome. The audio, yeah, I went and saw a show in a magic cave, but look who I met and the festivals that we're doing and the connections that we're making." So it's music done right from my perspective. And my perspective is literally just as a fan, as a patron. So I just want the caverns to be like it would be if I didn't have anything to do with it. And that's really our guiding light. I know some people have some questions though. We should jump into that if we got. I keep seeing some on there. If anybody's got anything.
Well, there's folks who are sort of interested in the booking process and who gets in touch with who, and how do you make yourself very easily available on the website to say if you've got a band you want to send me a package for, drop me a note at Todd at Caverns, or how does that work?
Yeah, sure, sure. You can go on the website and do that. But bottom line, it's a business, it's a 1,200 cap venue. So you need to be somebody, you need to have fans that want to come from all over the country to pay money to travel to see you play at the Caverns, right? And it's, say 80% of the artists that we have are the type of artists that would play the Ryman Auditorium or Red Rocks, or that's we're smaller in capacity than the Ryman, but it's such a cool venue, and we can charge a premium for our tickets, and our expenses are less. So we're able to be competitive with venues that are twice our size and even 3 or 4 times our size because bands want to play it. Their fans want to come see a show with the Caverns.
Yeah.
So, it's cool. So that's, we're always on the lookout, and I'm always talking to people. A good friend of mine, Dugan, his son is in college, and there's a couple free bands he told me about before they were big, and then they got big and too big for us to get them. And I'm like,
Mm.
next time, boy, he's got somebody he wants to tell me about. I'm all ears. And so he threw one at me called Old 60, and they're young guys out of Kentucky. And so I looked them up. Their trajectory showed that they were not going to be able to sell out the Caverns, but I could see their green arrow going up. We booked them, shows on sale, trending towards a sellout. So if anybody out there has got any ideas of somebody, please let us know, because I'm always, what we usually get more is, you should have Sturgill Simpson there, or you should have, I get a little bit more of that than I do of something that's actually, but to really delve into your question a little deeper, I don't know what it is about this, the way it's different than it used to be. And I guess I don't know, it's not as TikTok. I don't even know I have TikTok, but something is in the zeitgeist with the media in the world where bands can go from nothing to huge so quick. And
Yeah.
for us, we got to capture them, as quick as we can before they get to where they're not going to play a 1,200 cap venue or even the Ryman anymore. And, that's something that we see all the time. And so it's like, man, sometimes you'll have somebody, you're like, God, we should have grabbed them. But when you look at their numbers, they're not there yet. And by the next cycle, they've already skipped past you. And that happens to us, and
Yeah.
that's something that we
And
have.
bands are booking so more months out ahead of in the calendar than people have ever seen, like 6, 8 months
Well,
sometimes.
a good example, Red Clay Strays last year, in 2020, like this time last year, I hadn't heard of Red Clay Strays. They were maybe doing 200 or 300 tickets. Next thing you know, they actually reached out to us, which I loved. I was like, God, please, that's wonderful. But they reached out and wanted to play the Caverns, but they had literally just sold out 3 nights at the Ryman. And we're like, we want to play the Cave. And they did 3 or 4 nights at the Caverns. And it was just like residency there, sold out in seconds. Now they're
Yeah.
going playing this next year. They'll be in freaking, Bridgestone or something. I don't know, but it's cool to see such a fast trajectory. Like you love it for the artist that's happening for them, but as a booking, as a promoter, you're like, shit, like it could be a challenge, and plus just losing shows. We have the amphitheater. If there's a band I want to see at Ascend or at Orion, it pings me. I'm like, God dang it. Like you want the band, but it's just like, so it's a challenge. It's a challenge competing against Live
Is
Nation, AEG, and, they
Yeah.
do these big routed things and can do multiple things. And I'm just me. So, it's a competitive, element. It's a fun one, but, there's plenty of competition, and, margins ain't exactly probably better margins in sports booking, handicapping than there is in the music
I
business.
I'm so struck by the what people might see as a disadvantage being 75 minutes out of Nashville. I see as a huge advantage for you. You can do things that if you were in the urban footprint of Nashville, even if you had a unique venue like you do, there's something about the economy and the ecosystem there. You seem to have much more freedom where you are. And it's a little bit like the success of the music cruises. When you take it out of an expensive real estate and you put it in a place that's kind of more, more boutique, more destination oriented, the people that go there want to have a bonding experience.
Yes.
You're a little like a music cruise underground. Um,
Well, here's something crazy. This is crazy. So Andy Levine, who was the founder of Six Man, that did the whole music cruises thing, and now he does the Moon Crush or whatever. He sold it out to Norwegian or whatever. He's my freaking cousin, and I never knew
ah,
what Andy was doing, and he never knew what I was doing. And
wow.
like, two guys, so there must have been something in the water. I don't know where. They're like doing these destination music things, and like we knew each other when we were kids, backyard football, whatever. But
Wow.
I never really saw or spoke to Andy for, decades, and then and found out. And we laugh about that now and keep up with each other on different things. So, yeah, you're right. It's a little bit like that, and um, it's um, it's just really, I tell people, yeah, we're in the music business. Yeah, we're in the tourism business, but we're just kind of in the experience business. And if people can go somewhere and do anything and have a great experience, and that's really the future of the caverns of what we're really looking to do. We are planning on having a lodge. I do want to have, things for people to be able to do 365 days a year, where
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, there's big shows on the weeknights, but you can come stay at the caverns, and there's all sorts of go on a hiking trail, go on a cave tour, go to a brewery. This beer made from the limestone filtered water from the cave, that's with the grains of the field that came right next door. And there's a whole sort of a continuation of the experiential part of the caverns, into a restaurant and lodge, and just a place for people to come and have a great musical experience in the great outdoors. So that's kind of where that's what a lot of my focus is, currently, as far as the future goes.
Great. Well, that's what I was going to ask is just to have you talk a little bit about where your vision is these days, because I know you're always cooking something up. But I think that gets us to a real nice stopping point. Is there anything, Tom, have you seen any questions that you'd really love to have us flag before we go?
You answered the main one. Glenn Friedman was anxious to learn how to book a band at the caverns. And
Mm.
so, Todd, are you the primary buyer?
I am.
Are you? Awesome. Well, you obviously do a fantastic job curating. And were you also the main buyer for Music City Roots?
Oh, I definitely was. Yeah.
Unreal. Well,
Yeah.
you
And had no experience in that. And I do want to say this real quick. I'd be remiss if I didn't. Um, Joe Lurgio is the general manager of the Caverns, and I kind of refer to him as my right hand. But you know, he's the guy that really runs day to day at the Caverns at this point. And you can't have two bosses. You don't. It doesn't work that way. And I've sort of got it set up where I tease, but I'm like, I used to do everything, which I did. I used to set the chairs out for the audience. I used to take them down at the end of the show. I used to meet the artist at the top, bring them down, say, I mean, I used to do everything. Now I don't do anything. And so, but that's not true. Behind the scenes, I do things. But like when I actually go to the Caverns, nobody looks at me as the boss, and that's with intention. I've kind of set the culture, but the person that's day to day really running things and with everything, operational booking, there's nothing Joe's not in. So, and our whole team is filled with great people. So I just shout out to them, and one thing I would impart to people, you know, if you're starting something or doing something is, my God, learn how to let go. Learn how to surround yourself with people that are better than you, and lean in when you need to lean in, and then let go. And I'm on a process of letting go with that, with the caverns, not in terms of the vision for it, but in terms of surrounding myself with great people and not being so involved, because let their creativity flourish, and that's yeah, just want to say that.
so Glenn's asking one more time, is there an email that he can hit you at
Yeah, it's
with
on the caverns. Do email Joe at thecaverns.com, and
okay.
also Beatrice at thecaverns.com. Beatrice is our booking coordinator, and Joe's a GM, and me and Joe. So there's no show that gets booked that you know I'm not involved in, and Joe's not involved in, and then Beatrice helps us keep it all together and coordinated. So reach out to us. You can also copy me on that. You're welcome to. My email is Joseph Todd Mayo at gmail.com. JosephthoddMayo at gmail.com. I don't have a Caverns email because I used to have so many different businesses that I just said, I just got to have one. I can't keep up with it all. And now I've pared down and I just have the Caverns, which is great, but I just keep one old emails, the old tried and true.
Hey, Todd, confirm another thing I've heard about the caverns. The temperature is constantly like 50 degrees,
58
365 days.
degrees, Tom, with 98% humidity. So what's interesting is, it's a little bit of a lesson in Einsteinian relativity. because in the summertime it feels like nature's air conditioning, and in the wintertime it's like, my, what a warm and toasty cave. So the cave doesn't change the way you experience it does. The only time that I ever get cold in the cave, in the winter I wear a t-shirt, in the summer I wear a t-shirt, but if it's similar temperature outside as inside, I get a little cold. So if it's in the
Yeah.
50s, I always get cooler in the cave. But yeah, we just did a show. We got a show last weekend, Driving and Crying, and had a comedy show. Then had a Stephen Curtis Chapman doing a Christmas thing last Sunday. We got shows coming up till the end of the year, and it was so cold last week, but in the cave it was just warm and toasty.
That's awesome. Well, listen, to both of you, thank you so much. Craig, it's always a pleasure to have you on our platform. You are a walking encyclopedia of music. I know you hate it when I say that, but you absolutely are. And Todd, you are simply a force of nature. Your backstory is fascinating. You are the smartest guy I've ever met that didn't graduate from high school. I'm just going to say it right.
Well, let me say this real quick. Two things on this. Number one, on the name of this podcast, I almost disqualified myself from being on it. I said, you're going to have to call it the luckiest thing. But I want to say something about Craig, because I write in that book, I was always a big fan of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. And I write at the end of the book about this pilgrimage I took to the Eagle and the Child, the pub where they'd read each other stuff. And I said, I always, when I was writing about Craig back when I wrote this book, because I was writing about different people, and the way I described Craig, I said, if I always wanted to have my own little inkling society where you'd sit around with really smart people and you'd have a beer and you might talk a little about writing or poetry or pop, well, just whatever. I said, if I had that, Craig Havighurst would be my number one draft pick for that. And I wrote that in that book, and it's true. Craig, you're a great dude. I love your mind, but obviously you got heart and soul too, brother. But I wrote in that book there that Craig was the brain of Music City Roots, or mind, and maybe Jim was the soul. I forget what I said, or me and John were the heart. But I was dividing it up among people. But Craig has got a hell of a mind, but a great spirit, soul, and all that too. So
Thanks, dog.
it's
Appreciate you.
good to spend time with you, brother. I love you.
You too, man. Thank you.
Well, to the audience, I promised that you would leave today smarter and more inspired than you arrived, and I am certain we delivered on that promise. I want to thank you for a great year of programming. This wraps up our programming for this year. We are going to take a few weeks off and celebrate the holidays, and we will be back here on January 9th. In the meantime, just be nice to each other. See you soon, boys.
Darn right. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you, Craig.